Last week, I asked you about Explorer Mode on the Devil's website, Twitter. Explorer Mode is new with Rite of the Nine, but hopefully will remain some kind of a permanent fixture of the game. Explorer Mode is an easier difficulty mode for dungeons, where the game itself tells you how different mechanics work, and the combat is also much more forgiving. The loot isn't as high tier, nor can you complete any high tier triumphs in there, which is fine because it's more about learning. This is something that I have been advocating in favor of for a while now, most recently talking about this with Mr. Raffle Waffles, aka Milo, in a sort of podcast that we did recently, but I've also spoken about this, years ago. World of Warcraft has had a looking for group level difficulty mode for a very long time for some of their content, which is designed to be much easier than their normal mode so that people can get into a raid environment with lower pressure to try some new things. Speaking of trying new things, I'm trying a new segue to our sponsor, Cook Unity. I don't have like a nice set like Linus does, so you're gonna have to deal with it. Cook Unity is a chef-to-consumer platform bringing freshly made meals made by real people straight to you. They have over 100 meals to choose from every week with a wide range of dietary options. You got vegan, keto, low-calorie, paleo, you name it, odds are they got something waiting for you. What you won't be doing is waiting around at the grocery store for your partner to finally text you about what her fourth favorite root vegetable is. Just pick one, lady. I want to come home. I got video games to play, man. It's like you don't even care. And in the interest of trying new things, I too am trying new things. Like the baked swai in Cajun pan sauce by Chef Andres Mendez here in Seattle. But I got old reliables on me too, like the adobo braised pork shoulder by Chef Stacy Barang, and the chicken burrito and guajillo sauce by... I almost had it. God. And the chicken burrito and guajillo sauce by Chef Santos Jimenez. I've been with Cook Unity for almost a year and a half now. I love their stuff, and I always get great feedback from those of you who have signed up. So if you want to try something new, head over to cookunity.com/Datto50 and use code Datto50 to get 50% off of your first order of Cook Unity. That's cookunity.com/Datto50, code Datto50 to get 50% off your first order. Thank you very much to Cook Unity for sponsoring this video. So I asked what people thought of the mode, and so far it has been mostly positive, with the only negatives being more like small criticisms and or fixes that I think are pretty reasonable. First off, this edition is great because it is getting people who have never interacted with this kind of content into this kind of content. Even if you're not on Ultra GM Crush My Balls mode, it is still cool to be in these kinds of spaces because they are some of the best spaces in the entire franchise. And with Rite of the Nine being free, this is paid content that people are now able to access for free for the next couple of months. Part of why I started my Destiny YouTube journey was that I wanted to be raid guide guy from my time watching World of Warcraft raid guides. I will never stop loving hearing that my guides got people into some content that they never would have otherwise played, because I still believe that the raids in Destiny are not only the best content in the game, but some of the best experiences in multiplayer gaming, period. I want people to see these environments, experience these encounters, and know the thrill of playing in a good group, potentially making friends with those people and just elevating their gameplay experience by multiple factors. Not only this, but the dungeons, or rather just Spire for now, are easy enough on Explorer mode that you're also able to go in by yourself to just mess around at your own pace with no risk. Sure, you could also load into solo on like the regular version, but that doesn't have all of the info, and it's also much harder. It's not really where you go to learn. I want to hit some comments from this thread and respond to them though. Quote, I understand the basic mechanics, but it often takes many runs to get the details, like the locations of all the arc nodes on each level going up the spire and at the boss. I know what to do, but remembering where they all are is a struggle. I like the notifications on screen. So this is a completely normal thing in doing the dungeon and doing raids. Part of the experience is doing repeated runs to build familiarity with the mechanics and the combat, all that kind of stuff. Yes, remembering the node locations is going to be tough when you're first learning, but after a few runs, if you are making the choice to actually learn, then it will just become second nature. The biggest piece of advice I liked to give in my coaching videos was learning enemy spawns in every piece of content, because when you know what is coming and when it's coming, the game gets a lot easier. The same energy can be applied to memorizing the locations of these nodes or whatever other mechanic you're learning in a dungeon, but you gotta want to learn, otherwise it's just not gonna stick. Quote, "It's a good start, but if the object was to teach the dungeon, it's not there yet. The tooltips force you to read in the middle of a fight, so I'd say have a way to interact to make it an info banner on the bottom of the screen that you exit via escape key. Needs better path breadcrumbs and optional mechanics description," end quote. So there is something here that I totally agree with. A lot of these tooltips provide pretty helpful information, but they appear only in the middle of a live encounter. That can result in a pretty weird experience where everything is trying to kill you while you're reading along with whatever the Arctrician buff prompt is trying to tell you on screen. Having some kind of a splash screen to look at in its own isolated menu that doesn't require you to have the fight active would probably go a long way. Maybe there's like a thing that you can pull up with your ghost and your ghost has a bunch of information. That being said, the enemies at this difficulty are probably some of the weakest enemies that exist in the game, but it's still jarring to be reading this information in the middle of an active encounter. With regards to the optional mechanics stuff, I have a note about that a little bit later. Quote, "Somehow my random teammates still don't seem to know what they're doing, leaving people with experience to solo everything while they add clear. It honestly doesn't seem to have helped them figure out mechanics, it just helped with them getting a clear." Unfortunately, I don't know how much people like this can really be helped. If people do not want to actually learn and they just want to get a clear, no amount of guidance is going to do anything at all for those people. There's definitely a difference between not understanding and not wanting to understand and just getting carried by someone who does. I'm more than happy to help out the not understanding the mechanics people more than I am the not wanting to understand mechanics people. But there are going to be people out there who simply just want to be carried to a clear and nothing's going to stick, and that is an unfortunate side effect of having any kind of match-made anything in the game. There were also a few comments about the platforming sections not being as well defined, so I ran a full spire by myself on Explorer mode to see what's going on with the platforming stuff. The game nudges you in the right direction with the occasional markers that say, come over here, but the game doesn't explicitly tell you where to jump for every single platforming everything, and I think that's kind of okay. Again, we are still in a dungeon environment. We're in an endgame environment, and having a little bit of trial and error being a part of the experience, I don't think is a bad thing. It encourages people to actually have to think about where to go, what to do, and I realize that Explorer mode should be kind of on the educational side, maybe mostly on the educational side, but it should also instill some curiosity in the player. It should encourage the player to explore. It's not handhold mode, it's not do these steps exactly mode, and I think having those moments of not completely guided success is a good motivator for the player. It's suited more towards people who want to learn, not necessarily people who just want to be carried through an activity. That being said, I could understand if people wanted Explorer mode to be 100% educational. To me, it seems like Bungie wanted to maybe leave in a bit of the exploration and discovery part of the experience in the activity. That being said, I was surprised at the lack of direction in the final boss encounter. The game has given you all of the tools that you need from the previous encounters, but I'm surprised there wasn't some sort of a prompt for the 5 central nodes that you need to shoot to both start the next part of the fight and trigger the damage phase. The only thing that appears here is one of those IX map markers saying, come over here, but that's all it says. It just says, come over here. Thankfully, though, the activation window for the damage phase is very long. I waited around a full minute, and I'm guessing that nothing happens until you do the correct thing here, which is nice to not have to deal with the time pressure. I did have the boss bug out on me one time, though, on top of the fact that the game doesn't tell you that the boss needs to be in that room in order to trigger the next step of the damage phase. But given how long this took, I'm guessing that this could also be something where the game gives you unlimited time to get the boss into the correct room, but like, how would you know that you need to get into the correct room without the game telling you? You just kind of have to do some trial and error. But this is one of those things where I think it would be okay for Bungie to guide the player a little bit more. Let me know on that. Otherwise, most of the feedback has been really positive, which is awesome, and I hope it encourages people to hop in to this kind of content, and then maybe even dial up the intensity from there. I am wondering what the experience will be like in the other dungeons, since they are a bit harder. This does beg the question, though. Could this eventually be expanded to raids? And while I do think the answer is yes, I think the raids would need to be really toned down in order to accommodate based on some of the feedback that I've seen. You have to think about the lowest common denominator here. What if 6 people who have never done a raid, but are also coming in with the not wanting to understand attitude, roll into the Explorer mode match made raid? Would any progress get made at all? Would you have it be match made? Do you make it so the raid is clearable with less than 6 people because it's been made so easy? Can you make it soloable? There's so many questions to answer with this topic. Personally, I think you might have to bring raids down to like a 6-player seasonal activity level of difficulty to make it so people could actually clear the raid, especially if there isn't going to be any significant communication other than maybe text chat. At that point, is the raid experience still really even intact anymore? You also got to think about the duration of some of these raids, especially if there's a lot of people who don't know what they're doing. You might have people in there for hours trying to learn if they're doing some sort of match-made grouping, and that might be a bit much for people to deal with. On the other hand, you might just have to make some concessions and say, you know, look, we know that it's Explorer mode, but this experience is still going to demand some level of gameplay from you, the player, so that way we, as Bungie, can still deliver some kind of a raid experience to you. My worry would be watering it down so much that it doesn't even feel like a raid anymore. It just feels like you're in a seasonal activity that happens to take place in the raid. Like, is being physically in the raid enough for people? I'm sure for some, yeah, but for others, they want to experience something close to a raid. It probably just depends on who you ask, really. I would love for it to happen, but it'll definitely be tough to execute well. You might need a couple of iterations to find the sweet spot on that. Or maybe you just have multiple iterations where you have like the seasonal activity mode and then a version that's clicked up from that. But I think that's all I got. Good stuff. Bungie, good stuff. Explore mode seems pretty good. People seem to like it. People are getting into these environments. I love that for them, and I hope anyone who has stepped into a dungeon for the first time recently had a good time, and I hope that you continue to learn more and maybe want to step into the harder difficulties. This stuff is really the best the game has to offer, and to miss out on so much of it, I think is a travesty. I think it's a travesty. Speak up in the comments. I want to read about your experiences so far. Thank you very much for watching. I will see you next time.